Hi, everyone. My name is Monica, and I host a show called In Her Words podcast. And if you've been following my story, you'll know that it's one of a lot of trauma, but also a lot of healing. But there's something I wanted to talk to you about today that has really shook me. It has been very upsetting for me since I found this out about a week and a half ago. And I was debating on whether or not I should even mention it because I always try to think, why am I sharing something? What is the purpose? Is this going to be helpful? And I have decided that this could be very helpful for you to understand what happened in the process of grooming with the predator who assaulted me when I was about 16 and a half. So at 11, my stepfather assaulted me. I lived with my mother for a few years after that. Even though she knew what took place, nothing really happened. He never touched me again, but he did plenty of other things to disrupt my life and cause me a lot of anxiety and uncertainty. But at the age of 15, I started to babysit for our pastor's family. I was invited to help with the two children that they had, and I started to babysit and was with that family quite a lot. And by the age of 16, right around there, I moved into this pastor's home. I was told by the pastor and my mother that they had made a decision that's what would happen. And not too long after I moved in with this pastor's family, probably within a year, I started to be sexually assaulted by the pastor. And that was very difficult for me because I just came out of a situation where something happened. This pastor and his family knew, the pastor and his wife, and most of the staff knew that I had been sexually assaulted by my stepdad. And here I'm moving in with this family in the hopes of being able to land in a safe place, in a spot where I could be taken care of. And that's how they presented it. But what I didn't know, and I just found out about 10 days ago, is really eye-opening and upsetting. And I wanted to share it with you because I hope that when you hear how this happened in my life, it will allow you to look at situations maybe you're involved in or your children or other people and look at things a little more carefully. Someone asked me, where were your parents throughout all this? Like, where was your protection? And they had their own things going on. Like my mother was divorced and then remarried and then married the pedophile and then she was pregnant by him. My dad worked a lot and did what he thought he should be doing, which is providing for his family, which was great. But as far as having protection for my family, I couldn't answer that question when I was asked that last week. So I'm going to read this to you because it's kind of emotional for me right now to sit here and tell you what I just found out, because it actually adds to the pain of what happened to me with this pastor. Because now I'm understanding that he had his eyes on me much earlier than the age of even 15. Again, when I was asked to babysit for his family. And I didn't know this until 10 days ago. So I'm going to read this because I feel like sometimes when I read it, I'm able to focus in on it and maybe keep my emotions a little bit in check so I can actually share this with you. So just bear with me, but I think this is crucial for you to hear, again, so you understand the grooming process. So I call this a shocking truth I never knew. Something was recently brought to my attention that has deeply unsettled me. Until now, I had no knowledge of it. And what I've learned has left me disgusted, heartbroken, and even more concerned about the predatory behavior of this man. This revelation only confirms what I now understand. He had intentions for me long before I even started helping his family or living in his home. An old friend from my teenage years recently reached out and asked me to call him. When we spoke, he shared something that left us both shaken. And in fact, I'll pause right here to say, the first thing he said to me when I called him was, if you ever prosecute this man, if you're ever able to, I want to testify on your behalf. He said, because when this happened, I was really confused by it. I didn't understand it. But now that I've heard your testimony, I understand what was going on. So I'll go on to read. In 1984, I was 14 years old, and I had just started attending that church. At that time, I had a completely innocent teenage relationship with a boy from the church. We liked each other, nothing more than that, but what he told me recently horrified me. Back then, he was suddenly called into the pastor's office and was harshly reprimanded and told that he was not allowed to like me or be my boyfriend. He had no idea why. He remembers saying something in response, and then he was kicked out of the office. So again, I was 14. This is when this man just came to the church to take over it. And he already had his eyes on me. See, I never knew this happened. I had no idea. But now, 40 years later, I realize exactly what was happening. This pastor had his eyes on me from the beginning, as I've said. Just 1 year later, at 15 years old, I was asked to help care for his children. And by 16, he went to my mother, from what I understand, and asked if I could move in with them. Looking back now, I see it clearly. This was intentional. It was calculated, and it was grooming. For those who may not understand, grooming is a manipulative process where an abuser slowly gains trust, isolates their target, and creates dependency, all while making their actions seem more normal or even caring. It often starts with small favors, special treatment, or a position of trust, just like what happened to me. At that time, I had no idea what grooming was, but I do now. And it is my responsibility to educate others so they can recognize it before it's too late. It is disturbing to realize that this predator was watching, waiting, and orchestrating situations to gain access to me as a vulnerable young girl. And what's worse, from my understanding, this pattern has repeated itself for decades. Since coming forward, I have been contacted by multiple individuals, former caregivers, church members, and young girls who have shared that they too were groomed or treated inappropriately by him. Some of these stories are from just a few years ago. I am certain that there are more victims, possibly even right now. This is why I cannot stay silent. This must be taken seriously. I need people to understand the depth of this situation. Grooming is real. Abuse doesn't always happen in one moment. It is often planned, slow, and manipulative. This is not just my experience. This is part of a much larger pattern that has gone unchecked for years. If you have experienced something similar, whether it's from this person or another, please know that you are not alone. I always say this, but your voice matters and truth matters. And together we can bring light into what has been hidden for far too long. So since I found this out, like I said, about 10 days ago, at first I was trying to understand what I was being told, just like, I was shocked. I mean, I knew what happened to me at 15, being invited into the family a little bit, getting to know them, being around them more. And then at 16, once I was in their home, the flirtation with him kind of started right off the bat. And I didn't take it as flirtation, because why would a pastor, an older man, be flirting with me? I mean, I didn't put two and two together. It was very naive. But now that I hear that at 14, he had his eyes on me, it's hard for me to hear that. I wanted to read a little bit more about grooming and manipulation. These predators are often master manipulators, very skilled at identifying vulnerabilities in their victims. And wasn't I vulnerable? Grooming tactics include flattery, special attention, emotional manipulation, isolation, and gradual boundary violations. That's exactly what happened to me. Many build trust over time, making their eventual abuse feel confusing to their victims. I was looking up what type of traits do these predators have, and I have all this information. I'm not going to read all of it, but I think it's important to read some of it. These predators are often obsessed with power and dominance over others. In religious settings, they exploit spiritual authority to manipulate victims into compliance, using scripture or theological arguments to justify their actions or silence them. Predators justify their actions using distorted thinking, such as, it wasn't really abuse, or I'm doing so much good for God and the church, so this is a small issue. Or sometimes they blame the victim and they'll say things like, he or she tempted me, they wanted it. And unfortunately, when my old friend told me the story about how he was pulled into the office and pretty much threatened not to talk to me, which is just, it's crazy. He also told me that around that time, he too was sexually assaulted by another pastor in that church. And this pastor he's speaking of, I had already heard another story from someone else that they were sexually assaulted by him. And this pastor still pastors at that church. He's one of the pastors there. He's in the leadership. If I sound exhausted from this, let me tell you, it's just gets weirder every day. It does. If it's not every day, it's at least every week since I came forward that I keep hearing stories about victims. And it makes me really angry for other people, even more for myself. I'm just upset by it, and it has to be stopped. And when is it going to be stopped? I did want to tell you also, briefly here, I'm kind of interject this, that I have reached out to someone in the state legislator's office, and I sent a letter to them. Because what I don't understand is, why are there statute of limitations for sexual abuse victims? I mean, that doesn't exactly protect victims, right? And we have to change that. And I know Indiana is a little bit slower going sometimes with laws that need to be changed, but I think that if we survivors rally together, we need to bring attention to the fact that the statute of limitations needs to be eliminated. Because statistically, victims do not come forward, sometimes ever, but it could be 30, 40, 50 years before they've had enough healing or enough maturity to be able to come forward and talk about it. So we can't expect victims to come forward in 5 years or by the age of 31. That's outrageous, and that needs to change. I'm going to talk about the lack of accountability for a lot of abusers. Many of these leaders operate within closed, unregulated environments where they are shielded by enablers. And if that ain't what's going on over here, I don't know what is. They surround themselves by loyal followers who dismiss accusations. They attack the victims or believe that the leader is anointed and above scrutiny. There is a cycle of predatory behavior as well. Once they succeed in getting away with abuse, their behavior escalates. If unchecked, they may repeat offenses for decades, refining their tactics and choosing victims who are least likely to be believed. Very conniving, isn't it? So manipulative. Some use faith as a weapon, telling victims that exposing them would harm God's kingdom, or that forgiveness means silence. They create a culture of fear, where questioning their behavior is seen as questioning God. That is so twisted. Many predators have a secret double life. They maintain a highly respected public persona while leading a secret life of manipulation and abuse. This contrast between public holiness and private sin can make it incredibly difficult for people to accept the truth when victims come forward. So I don't know how much of this information is unsettling to you, but everything that I'm reading is unsettling to me. And for me personally, what I found out 10 days ago, like I've said numerous times, has truly affected me. I have been just unsettled, and I have a hard time sleeping. And I actually made an appointment for this week to meet with my psychologist that I haven't seen in a while, because now that I've come forward talking about a trauma that happened to me so many decades ago, some things are resurfacing, and there's more truth being revealed. So I'm realizing, like, this is so much bigger than me. This is way bigger. And then I'm realizing that he had me targeted from the age of 14. Oh, that just bothers me. While some of these abusers may have started with genuine faith, others use religion purely as a tool for control. Their true motivation is power, not pastoring. They see ministry as a means to an end rather than a calling. And let's ask this question: why do they get away with it? Victims are afraid to speak due to fear of spiritual retaliation, shame, or threats. And I want to stop here for a second. I'm a victim. I consider myself a survivor, but I'm going to use the word victim right now. I'm a victim of sexual abuse from a highly popular pastor who has great influence in this area, who has also done a lot of good. So it's very hard for people to really accept the fact that he could also be a predator. And when they say victims are afraid to speak out due to fear of retaliation, shame, or threats, I'm not so much worried about shame. Guys, I'm not. It is what it is. It happened to me, and I've accepted that. So I'm not dealing with shame right now, but there has been concern for retaliation. There has been concern for threats. There has been concern for a lot of these things, because this is just where we're at. This is what we have to worry about when we come forward. Congregants protect them, believing they are called by God, or dismissing allegations as attacks from the enemy. Churches and institutions sometimes silence victims, choosing reputation over justice. So I'm going to finish up reading this here on my computer here, and it's going a little slow. Predators in pastoral roles don't just fall into sin. They often plan, manipulate, and deceive with calculated intent. Understanding their psychology is crucial in dismantling their influence and ensuring real accountability and protection from those whom they harm. So I want to speak to anyone who is a victim now, or maybe in your past. And whether it's a teacher, whether it's a coach, and whether it's a pastor like it is for me, whoever it is, use your voice, come forward, talk to some trusted individuals. I said it in my other video, maybe go to your doctor first. Maybe you don't have a psychologist. Maybe you don't even feel like you can go to your pastor. Like for me, he was my pastor. Who was I going to go to? Who was I going to talk to? Someone below him? I didn't feel safe enough to do that, because I was told to take it to your grave. And I want to encourage you, don't do that. Don't take this to your grave. Don't hold this inside of you. Come forward. I'm kind of going full circle right now that since I found out at age 14, he had his eyes on me. And just within a few years, he had me under his thumb, basically. Isolated, afraid, alone, damaged. And I felt like I had nobody to go to. I wish I would have spoken up. Of course I do. I feel like back then we didn't talk about these things. The world has changed so much. You can talk about abuse and all of these issues with greater ease than you could then. So I want to encourage you to come forward. If you would like to speak to me personally, you can email me at inherwords.ihw@gmail. If you're watching Facebook and seeing this video, you can private message me. I would love to talk to you. I would love to hear your story in your words. And most importantly, let's understand and let's be open-minded about the fact that pastors can be predators. They can, and they have been. I think enough stories have come out now. A lot came out last year, more are coming out now. The truth will be revealed. And in this situation with this particular pastor and his church and his pastors who are under him and his leadership, it's time for accountability. And I'm praying that it's going to happen how God wants it to happen. But I'm believing that it will, because this cycle of abuse needs to end. But it won't end until we speak the truth. Thank you for watching. I appreciate all of the love and support. I will be making another video here soon, so keep watching. Thank you again.